Good morning, everyone. I am Lulu from How Now, and thank you for joining us today in the State of Customer Success in 2022 and how to win next year. So I'm just going to wait for a couple of minutes to wait for our attendees. And while I'm waiting for a few people, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm joined here today by Morika Georgieva, I hope I pronounced it okay, from Permutive, and Elise Marengo from User Pilots. How are you both today?
Doing quite well, thanks, Lulu. How are you?
I'm great. Very excited to be with you today. And just so you know, everybody, we are going to tackle today kind of the biggest CS trends of 2021. And Morika and Elise are going to help us kind of hurdle the challenges in time for 2022. So I'm just going to check quickly if we do have a few attendees. We probably are waiting a few more people to join. Feel free, everyone, as well, to drop kind of any questions that you have in the chat. We'll take a few questions and we'll make sure as well to spend some time at the end. Just so that you're all aware, what we'll be talking about yesterday, we'll be discussing how to manage growing teams. We just had a nice conversation with Morika and Elise in the background to discuss that a lot of teams are currently growing. We'll also talk about how to collaborate with other departments effectively within a business, and also how to use data to drive your CS strategy, and a whole lot more. I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions for you both, and I'm sure the audience will also have some. So just checking the attendees quickly. Okay, so I think we can probably start. So I'll start saying, first of all, again, thank you so much for being with us this morning. It's an absolute pleasure to have you both on board and everybody who's joining us today as well. So as we were discussing before we all joined this call, CS teams are definitely growing. And for example, there was a recent Totango study that revealed that 91% of CS professionals stated their teams have grown in the past kind of 12 months. And 76% said that their team now consists of more than 10 people. So how many people do you have in your team currently? Morika, let's start with you, for example.
Hey Lulu, lovely to be with you today, and thanks for everyone who's joined us. The team at Permutive in EMEA currently consists of 5 people and myself, but we have a similar team over in the US. So altogether, probably the range of what you mentioned, around the 10 to 12 CSMs.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Elise?
So our customer success team is actually comprised of 4 and myself, but we also have a customer experience team that's focused more on technical support and kind of troubleshooting issues, and they're another 4. So we're just below that 10 mark, but customer success specifically is a 4-man show right now.
Great. And I guess growing is good, but you have to do it right. Otherwise, it could be a bit challenging. So which challenges have you found when, for example, adding new customer success talent in your team? And what would be the kind of advice that you would give to people who might be growing their team as we're speaking, as we head to into 2022? So maybe Elise, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, I'd be happy to start. I think the common challenges that come up whenever onboarding somebody new or bringing new people into the team are pretty true across the board. Of course, just the actual process of getting somebody up to speed can be quite challenging. And I think, especially in customer success, you're not just training customers on your own product, but also on the processes that you have in place, getting them up to speed on how to fulfill their day-to-day role. So I think actually in our case, and I'm sure is true across the board, a lot of the things that you have to think about are actually, you don't need to think about hiring a customer success for today. Instead, you really need to think about somebody for 3 months from now. You need to, because it does take that kind of time to get somebody up to speed in a lot of cases. So you shouldn't procrastinate when it comes to thinking about when you're going to need to start expanding. Instead, really think about it pretty far in advance, because by the time that you will need to have them ready and up to speed, you probably have quite a bit of back time. So I think probably being very proactive is probably one of the pieces of advice I generally would like to give.
Yeah. What about you? What about you, Marika? What are the tips that you could give on that one?
Yeah, I think as Elise mentioned, hiring can be tricky. One of the things that I learned that could become a challenge is the really critical importance of understanding what qualities and attributes and kind of experience you are after before you start hiring. And by experience, I don't mean someone who spent X amount of years in X position. I mean really the day-to-day activities that someone has been involved in. So customer success is a very exciting and growing field, but it's also quite nascent, which makes it quite inconsistent across the board. Like every CSM is going to know that being a success manager in one company would be quite different to another. Some CSMs carry a quota, others have never upsold in their careers. Some CSMs are more transactional, others are very consultative and they know how to ask the right questions. Like, what is customer success like at your organization? Think about this and then ask about those day-to-day experiences and how those candidates have carried out those activities. Because I think if you don't, what you're risking is you might end up hiring somebody with fantastic experience that just has no application at your company. So then what you're doing is wasting your time, effort, and ultimately money to hire someone who is not giving you what you want. And the I guess worst side of that is also that you're not giving that person what they're looking for, and you're not making them feel satisfied at their work. So my biggest learning has been kind of think about what you're looking for, think about what a CSM does at your company, and then structure your hiring process around that.
Yeah, and just something to go back to what something Elise was saying. So obviously hiring, great, but then there is a question of how long it takes people to get actually onboarded and up to speed. How long does that usually take from your perspective to have from the moment you hire someone till the moment that they actually are good to go and good to get on customer calls? Elise, how long does that usually take?
I think it's actually kind of interesting, because if you wanted to just, kind of let somebody set them free and kind of get going, I don't think that it necessarily takes too long, especially if you're kind of going off of what Marika just said about hiring the right kind of candidate. However, I think for them to truly feel confident in the day-to-day processes, not just the conversations between customers or going in and helping them in the processes in which they have with actual customer facing things. Actually, I think the more onboarding takes place in the behind the scenes things, right? And understanding how teams work, how to go up to different departments and request support, things like that. And so I usually say around 3 months is when I feel like I don't have to be checking in with the, like, how are you doing today? What kinds of things can I support you with? Where do you need some additional help? Around 3 months. But I still feel like in times when I've been with the company for 2 years, I feel like sometimes I go to my team and I'm like, I still don't understand how to do this. And I feel like I'm still being onboarded on a lot of occasions. So I think 3 months is more or less when I feel like they're out of the nest, but they still hope to come back every once in a while to check in. But that's my experience, also because I have a more technical product. So, getting comfortable with the actual tool itself is a whole nother difficult aspect. So.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely a big challenge here is in making sure that you allow and enable your team to have access constantly to that knowledge of processes, etc., on whether it's a specific tool or whether it's training session. So I guess that leads me to the next topic really well. And it won't surprise you that one of the topic that we were interested in talking today about was how CS reps are actually learning, especially if new people are joining the teams and your teams are growing. So how are you seeing that at the moment, and where are your CS people picking up the knowledge and learning new skills? What are you using specific tools and methods? How do you see this working? Maybe Marika, we can start with you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something that I feel very passionate about. Permutive is in the advertising and digital advertising space, which changes on a daily basis. So it's super important for our team to be industry experts and be very, very good at what's going on around them in the industry. I think we've been on this journey. I find that we were learning and growing quite organically until very recently, and now we're having to be very, I guess, intentional or purposeful about how we're delivering knowledge to our CSMs and to ourselves as well. One of the things which I think people can do and managers can do quite easily without specific tooling, and I probably do this a little bit too much as a manager, is to constantly push their own CSMs to talk to their peers about what they're doing, even if no one is asking them to. Talk about things that they're working on and things that they've been successful at, but also talk about their mistakes. Like, I think that it's so important to like normalize mistake conversations as a thing that happens all the time. Like, we talk about the importance of making mistakes and learning from it, but we can't afford, as especially if you're in a startup environment, you can't afford for everyone to only learn from their own mistakes. Like, we need to make one mistake everyone's learning. So I'm constantly, because I speak to all the teams, I'm constantly trying to think about, oh, can you tell the team about this thing that didn't work out and what you did? Can you tell them about X, Y, Z and something else? And I think especially in a remote environment, like, it's so important to purposefully create those opportunities for learning. So I think that's something that you can do on a daily basis. And then the other thing is, like, we're now at the start of our journey where we're starting to form an enablement team that are bringing in their own tooling and knowledge management platforms, which looks really, really exciting. It definitely looks like a game changer for us. I think probably in the next few months, we're going to start to feel the real impact of it. But definitely we've been growing and putting our own kind of homemade solutions up until this point when we're ready to bring in something more structural.
Yeah, and I guess that's exactly what you're saying, is making sure that you enable people that gather information, lesson learned, that they can share this with the team on a daily basis. And it's not only very much of a top-down approach, and you are actually facilitating the knowledge sharing within your teams, whether it's only within the CS team, but also with the other departments, because we'll talk about this in just a little bit, there is so much collaboration from a CS perspective that it's important everybody is on the same page. How about you, Elise? How do you facilitate that learning with your CS reps?
I think that Marika hit on a couple of things, and that's sharing between the CSMs themselves is huge. I think that one of the things that we started very early on was attending these kinds of webinars, these kinds of functions, but being able to say, like, this is in so-and-so's time zone, this works great for them, they're going to attend. And then afterwards, they usually have like a quick summary, things that they thought were interesting, things that they took away, attending conferences, and like taking this kind of learning where at the end of the conference, we all meet up and have a nice long Zoom session, and we present the things that we learned in our separate sessions and say, like, this was something that I really liked. Let's see if we can implement this. Let's try to modify this to see if it works better for us, and just kind of really disseminating information across our own department so that, you know, not everybody can be in all places at once. And I also do think we can get into a kind of oversaturation of too much content, too many ideas. So instead of having one person attend every single webinar, you know, once a month, somebody try to attend a webinar, listen to a podcast, read an article that they found interesting on LinkedIn that was shared by somebody that's in their network, and then be able to share that and how they then plan to implement it in their own day-to-day. I think that that's really important, like informative. I also love having our customer success managers share the feedback that they're getting from their customers. We all work in different regions. And so saying, like, this customer gave us this feedback, I think it's important for all of us to know. And so just really sharing it there. But also something that you mentioned, Lulu, is also not just within our tiny little customer success department, but also across the team. We have a Slack channel for learnings where we post, you know, interesting pieces of information, podcasts, articles that we're finding. Kind of, Marika, what you mentioned, being an industry expert is also really important. We're in the product-led growth kind of industry, and there's constantly articles being published about ways to use this. And so if we can take this information, not only use it for our own purposes within the department, but then also take that to our customers and say, we're doing the same thing that you're doing. This is how we're implementing it. How do you feel about it? Is this something that you'd like to use in your own structure and your own setup? So I think it can go, you know, from inside and kind of spread outward.
Yeah, and that's That's very interesting because I mean I could talk about this topic all day, but obviously onboarding, we put so much emphasis on onboarding customers in the CS team, but it's so important to also have onboarding program for your own team, for your own CSM or CSEs. Do you have something at the moment, or what is the approach that you're taking to make sure that you give the same experience to all of the people that are joining? Is it still very manual of a process, or how do you deal with that at the moment?
I'm happy to jump in. Thanks. It's evolving. So I'm just gonna I'll caveat my answer here. So when I joined Primitive about 2 years ago, we're about 60 people and or 70 in the UK, and now we've grown to over 130. So it's been an interesting journey, and it's been super exciting to see how things evolve. And it's true that with every onboarding that we have, it changes. Essentially, it used to be a much more manual process where we'll just talk to somebody who's onboarded and take them through everything as an individual session. We then kind of evolved into having a project plan. And what I really loved about that project plan is that once you put it together, it's very easy to copy and have it ready for the next person. But what's even better is because we're growing quickly and hiring people in relatively quick succession, what had happened is every time somebody is onboarded, you can get them to send you their ideas about how the next person that's onboarded can do it better, right? And if you're hiring once every 2 or 3 months, then that's very easy because it's still fresh in people's minds and so on and so forth. So we've relied on that. And the beauty of a project plan, I think, in a project management tool is that there's a lot of satisfaction in ticking tasks off. I think that's what people have enjoyed the most. Now, recently, we formed an enablement team, and specifically that started with a sales enablement function particularly. And we've actually learned quite a lot from the way our colleagues over in enablement have been doing this. We thought that we had good onboarding, and then they kind of came about and we realized that onboarding is not actually that good at all compared. So they're being a lot more tactical, a lot more strategic with how they're conducting that. So they have project plans where they're tying in how much time everyone is spending on particular tasks. They're doing a lot to make sure that people are not overwhelmed. We're not crowding their diary with meetings from 9 to 5 every single day, but they're also thinking about what are the most important bits of information that someone needs to learn first. So rather than going, okay, you need to learn all of these things this month, they're starting to be, okay, learn these things first, and then until you're 100% comfortable with those things, don't move on. These are the things that you can live without, but these are the things that you 100% need in order to do your job. So it's been an evolution, and I think the more we evolve, the more structured and more strategic we're having to be.
Yeah, and as you say, onboarding, it doesn't stop only, after the first 3 months of somebody joining. It's like almost building a house of knowledge. If you don't have really strong walls to build the house of knowledge, then you can't keep adding on top of that. So it's very true what you say. You need the pillars first, and then it's a constant kind of learning journey. And just a last question on learning, how do you make sure that, for example, I'm sure you have lots of processes in place, so not specific to onboarding, but how do you make sure that people have access to this knowledge at the right time, where they work? How does that work from your side? Do you have any templates available? At least maybe do you have any tips and advice on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way that we maintain the kind of knowledge base actually does start in the onboarding process. So when we hire somebody in the department, I kind of give them, I actually stole this from a colleague of mine, like a very dear friend, where she gives them basically like a university syllabus. And so it has like, customer success 101, 102, 103, 104, and it has all of the key components for customer success, but then you have a section on product, and so these are the classes and concepts you need to know in product. This is the sales classes, and so in sales 101 you have to meet the sales reps and get to know who they are, even if they won't be somebody that you directly work with. I think it's important for them to get to know them, but then also have an understanding of the sales process, because after the handoff you need to know what they've gone through during that process. So the syllabus has a little bit of everything. There's, some of the classes are just, in your own time, reach out to this person and schedule a 15-minute meeting with them. So they can kind of control their own onboarding, but then also in those lists, it has all of the documents that are hosted in a variety of places. Some of them are just housed on Notion. Some of them are actual help docs that go out to our customers. So there's, blog posts that talk about concepts that we've posted out, and those kind of usually are housed in the marketing section. And so this kind of onboarding syllabus is something that they have access to forever. It's just there, it's in their folder. And so if they want to go back and remember the fundamentals or touch back on something, or as new tools or new processes are added, they're also added to the master onboarding kind of template, so that in the future, customers will get that the first go around for onboarding, but users that are customers that have been, employees that have been with us, new tools are being added all the time, and they need to learn how to use them, but also teach them and support customers using them. So those just kind of have to go back into the initial document and kind of go from there. So
yeah, and it's so important as well what you say, and I think it's super relevant. Is sometimes you might have some knowledge that is sitting with the sales team that your CSMs or CSEs might need. So, for example, how to pitch your product, because then they would understand the benefits. Because sometimes what could happen is that CS teams might be really focused on the features and very specific buttons and things like that. But actually, if we take a bit of distance and go back to our overall sales pitch, then they would see the industry benefits of the product that you're actually selling in the first place, so that they have a 360 understanding of how it works on a technical level, perhaps on a functionality level, but also making sure that, people are learning from other teams as well. So I think somebody is just messaged me saying they cannot see me on the webinar. Can you still see me, Elise? And more? Yeah, okay. So it might be just one of the users. So perhaps if the person that just messaged me, if you try to log out and log back in, you should then be able to see me correctly. Otherwise, apologies if you can't. So we thank you for all of these knowledge about learning. It's super interesting, and that's definitely something that is close to my heart as working at How Now. So we're just going to move on to a different topic now. So one challenge or focus that we saw for 2022, and according to the same study of the Tango I was quoting earlier, a big focus is going to be customer advocacy. And that was definitely quoted as a priority item for 82% of the people that got asked. So it's fairly obvious that from a CS perspective, we're trying to create fruitful relationships, partnerships with customers. But how would you say can these relationships be transformed into much more advocates with your brand, with your product? So do you have any tips or advice on your approach to that? Perhaps Elise, if you want to start.
Sure, I'm happy to start. So the first thing I think that's really important, I have to say that our team has a really high touch model. So we're communicating with our customers on a very regular basis. And I think that customer advocacy does have to start with communication between customers. Otherwise, you can't advocate for something that you're not aware of. And also having a relationship with your company where you have to say, like, I have to advocate for my customers. I advocate for my team when I'm speaking to my customers, but it also has to work both ways. I feel like customer success is really in this middle ground where we have to take both product and like internal issues and resolutions and problems and explain them fairly to the customer, but also take customer issues and explain them fairly to our team and say, this is a priority and I need you to really be mindful of it. And so I think that there has to be that kind of recognition within your organization as well, saying, like, I understand that this might be kind of hard to hear, but our customers really need this, and having that support from your management teams and saying, of course, I'm not attacking the product. I'm not trying to be, really, difficult, but this is what our customers are saying. And I think it's important that you hear it, that it's documented, that it's and it's cared about. And so That's the first thing. But then also, I think having very clear communication. So if you receive feedback from a customer, it doesn't just go into a void and a vat where like you're receiving all this and it's just being pumped out. Maybe it is going somewhere, but if the customer isn't hearing that in return, they don't feel like they're being heard. And so taking the responses that you receive, giving them feedback about it and saying like, okay, so I hear you, this is what we're doing to work on this or discuss it. You know, sometimes feature requests are not going to get fulfilled. They're not going to get built because it's not part of the plan. So be honest with your customer and say, I appreciate that. I've discussed it with my team. And unfortunately, that's not on our roadmap right now. You know, being honest, I think customers would much rather hear, I'm sorry, that's not going to come, than expecting it to come for months and months and then never receiving it. So I think it's a little bit about it. It's support, honesty, and clear communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is so true as well to stay true to vision, because even as a person, as a user of multiple software, I would much rather hear it from the support. No, this is not something that is part of the roadmap, instead of waiting for months and months and chase the support team again and again. So I totally agree that it should be an honest relationship with your customers, for sure. What about you, Morika? How do you get this advocacy from your customers, and whether it's case studies or podcast or quotes? How does that happen from your side?
Yeah, I love how kind of Elise took the angle that she took in answering that question, because it's true that we can look at advocacy from two different angles, right? It's advocacy and how you advocate for your own customers, then how you turn them into advocates for your product and market. And I think the two are ultimately related. You're probably starting for advocacy coming from us for our own customers, which ultimately translates into them advocating for your product. And I was thinking actually about this question, and it's a tricky one. And there's, I think, the creating customer advocates in the customer success industry is becoming a little bit of a science in and of itself. There are people who specialize in that specifically. So I guess we could probably have a whole webcast on this, but the way I would think about it is, how would you as a customer become an advocate for a product or a service? Like, when was the last time you became an advocate? And I think for me, it's two different ways in which that can happen. The first one is I had a really strong pain and someone solved it, probably quite quickly. So God forbid there was a leak somewhere in your flat on a Sunday and someone was able to come in almost immediately and fix it all. It was a big pain for you and now it's gone. You're going to recommend that product or service time and time again. Or you went somewhere and you received service or a product that completely went above and beyond your expectations. For example, you went to a restaurant, like a neighborhood restaurant, and you didn't really expect what you're going to get, but it was absolutely delightful and you're going to go back there again and again. So I think it's one of those things. And I think as customer success professionals, maybe we can kind of adopt that mindset when we're trying to create advocates as well. So how do we find a really strong pain that we solve, or we continue to deliver above and beyond? And I think that's much easier said than done. And the key that we need to find here is like, how do we help our CSMs, one, find those pains, like really identify the really, really important pains to focus on and solve, and B, prioritize. So I think one of the key things that I'm trying to kind of create in our teams at Primitive is find what really is causing pain for a customer, or what can unlock a massive opportunity, and focus on those things. If you have time for the nice to have, that's great, like deliver those also, but like really spend time understanding one's business and what would make a change to them. And if you create that and if you deliver that change, then I think that you're in a good path to create an advocate in your customer.
Yeah, and pain points, I absolutely agree with you, Marka, is so important. And it's also coming from an expectation perspective, directly from onboarding or kickoff calls, or just from the very beginning at the early stages of onboarding a customer, is making sure everybody, whether it's the customer and the CS team, aware of these pain points that we are going to help them solve. Because, you know, sometimes it could be discussed in the sales process and it might be kind of lost along the way once the customer is handed over to the CS team. So it's so important to keep reminding those and to keep having this vision of, this is what we are going to focus on. This is what we are going to help you solve. And this is why you're going to get so much value out of our product. then, as you say, on top of that, if there are any more nice to have, we can help on that. But it's very important, and it also probably is going to help the CSM to set strategies with the accounts, whether it's after onboarding, during onboarding, or during running accounts, for example. So making sure that everybody is on the same page, so the education can be very much personalized for the customers, rather than being kind of one size fits all once again. So talking about these obviously handing overs and collaboration pieces. So let's talk about collaboration. There is a statistic that said that CS teams spend 50% of their time working with marketing teams, which is about 33% of an increase from last year. So I guess that seems to be a lot of time to spend working with other departments in a business. So who do you think it's important for a CS team to work with on a regular basis, and why do you think this is so critical?
Yeah, I think I touched on this just briefly, but I think this is one of those topics that, especially in a remote company, can be even more important to make sure that we're always mindful of. That I don't think that there is a department in the company that customer success managers shouldn't at least be mindful of and be open to communicate with, because there's, as customer success managers, you're technically kind of touching a little bit of everything. You need to be on the front facing side with your marketing, with your sales teams. Marketing, obviously, because not only are they helping bring in the customers that ultimately will be your customers, right? So making sure that they also have access to current customers, so they can provide more valuable content, they can get case studies, they can work at bringing in customers through the customers that you already have. But I also think, like we talked about before, your sales team, it's critical to be working with them for understanding the value, the proposition that they're giving out to customers, but then also in the handoff side, making sure that the promises that were made during sales are communicated to the CS team to make sure that those are achievable and achieved in the life cycle of the customer. Working obviously with your product team, that's one of the larger sections of my role, is making sure that we understand what's current in the product, what's coming from the product, what's in the ropes, what's not going to happen, so that we can constantly be communicating that. Our engineers, obviously, when there are bugs, when there are issues, being able to communicate that both from customers to the engineers, and then from the engineers to the customers, all of these departments. And then, of course, operations and management, every single department is kind of in one way or another going to impact your customer. And as the customer success manager, that's a priority of yours. So I think as soon as a customer success manager joins my team, I try to make sure that within the first 2 weeks, they're introduced to every single department. They're connected via Slack, they're connected via Zoom, making sure that if they need anything or if they have any questions, they feel confident going to that team directly, but also that team feels confident coming to them, saying like, the first time I ever message you isn't because there's a giant issue and I need you to solve it for me, but the first time you talk was like, hey, welcome, I'm so excited to meet you. So I think that that's pretty critical.
What about you, Marika? Is it kind of a similar?
I think Elise summed it up pretty nicely. To be honest, at the end of the day, customer-facing teams, we are the eyes and the ears and the hearts of the customer. So we need to be able to give them a view of our whole business as an organism. And in order for this to happen, we need to understand how it functions and who we can go to when we have problems. So yeah, 100% agree with what was said.
Yeah, and I guess the way that we work now within our own departments has changed quite a bit because, of this whole situation. And as the world moves into a bit more of a hybrid working world, how do you think your CS team can work together and share knowledge remotely or in a hybrid environment? How does that work as user pilot, for example?
Yeah, I think that that's one of those things. I had never worked remotely before, and so I was a teacher before this. So obviously, it's a little bit of a different scenario. However, those kind of like water cooler moments where you walk by and you get to share like the things that are going on just because of you know that you're casually meeting people, you're walking by them in the office. You don't have those casual, unintentional moments to share. So you do have to make them intentional. And so setting aside time, we in User Pilot, we have cross-departmental meetings, stand-ups at least once a month. So like CS meets with sales, and we have a weekly stand-up, but then also CS works with customer experience. We try to meet every other week, but sometimes it gets pushed a little bit, and where all of both teams meet together, just making sure that everything is going smoothly. But also it's nice, the first 10 minutes we're usually just checking in, seeing how people are doing, because I think also having those kind of intentional but casual conversations can really help foster communication. And then having all hands meetings where it's actually organized and managed intentionally. I think all of those are really critical. You have to make something that would have been an unintentional, intentional, but also productive. So it's challenging, but it's definitely worthwhile.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, so just going back a little bit to, customers' expectation, who's supposed to be responsible for these customer expectation? Because in a report revealed by TSIA, the State of Customer Success 2021, it revealed that expectations are set during the sales cycle for 52% of the time. But 54% believe that the primary responsibility for onboarding sits with the CS team. So how can CS team work with sales to set right expectation from the get-go as they close the deals? Maybe Marika, do you want to have an input on that?
Yeah. If anyone figures this out and is completely confident that they've cracked it 100%, I'd love to talk to you. I'm yet looking for it. I'm yet to speak to somebody in the customer success network altogether that goes, oh yeah, we've completely cracked our handover process and it's working super smoothly. It's difficult, right? Like it's always going to be a tricky one, because ultimately those are teams that are quite often motivated by different things. Even if you ultimately align a North Star metric that your whole company is after, it's a push and pull situation always with customer success and sales teams. So I guess a couple of questions here. The first question, who owns setting expectations? Absolutely everyone. I feel so passionate about the fact that the customer experience is everyone's responsibility. Like, the customer experience begins the first time somebody hears the name of your product, and then it continues when someone goes on their site. And quite often by the time somebody comes to speak to your CSM, their experience is half done. So putting that accountability entirely on the customer success team is just not fair, and it should be everyone's responsibility. Now, who is accountable and executes on it? Then those are the customer success teams, and we're the orchestrators that know what levers to pull and what to push in order to deliver the expectations that we'd like. The second question, how do we make that easier from a sales team handover perspective? We're working on it. One thing which I found quite helpful for us longer term is explaining, or like educating, letting the sales team in on why onboarding actually matters. So I guess as customer success professionals, we constantly read about success and we look at research like C and so on. We know, because we looked at the research, that onboarding is the single most important part of the customer experience. But if you think about how it looks to an outsider, somebody who's not in customer success, like, what do you mean? The contract's 2-3 years long. If you don't onboard it properly, you're going to fix it later. Why are you so worried? So actually taking an hour to walk your sales teams or any teams through concepts like time to value, customer satisfaction, expectation setting, and explaining to them what the research shows and why it's so important can really make a difference. Like, don't assume that everyone sees the world the way we do. Like, let other teams into your world, explain why this is so important, give them the data that we've seen across the industry, and that can really make an important step towards them putting in the effort and understanding how it impacts their work as well.
And that would definitely show as well how you have to translate these expectations into effective onboarding and why it is so critical from a CS perspective as well. Anything you would like to add on that, Elise?
Sure. So one of the things that I have seen actually was picked up by one of my customer success managers at another conference was preparing a pre-onboarding survey for the customers. So our team also actually does offer the first onboarding session. We offer a series of 3 onboarding sessions. We offer the first one during the trial. So our sales teams do have the option of, if they have a high intent customer, they can send them an onboarding link so that they can sign up. And when they receive that onboarding link, they receive a survey that has a series of questions about their product, about their tool. But then the last question of every survey is, how will you define that you've received value from User Pilot? What are your, what will prove to you that you've received value? So that not only do we have that in written record, but we can also, so if they do convert, we can always make sure that we're checking back with what they asked, and are we giving them that value? But also, if they ask for something that isn't something that we can provide them, sales knows and we know. And so we can say like, hey, remember that they said this. I'll try to talk to them and try to make sure that this is actually what they're expecting. But if this is what they are expecting and we can't deliver it, then we have to communicate that with sales, and they can make sure that actually this is it's not a great fit customer. And so I think that having very clear knowledge of what we provide as in value, and making sure that sales is aware of that, but also then has a customer success team having that as a kind of check back point. Are we delivering this? Are we working towards delivering this? And so, when it's time for renewal, we can say, remember when you asked this? And this kind of goes back to what you were talking about, Marika, with if they had a pain point. Look, we've solved it. Aren't you so happy? You've been with us for a year and you've solved this problem that you came to solve when you signed up. Do you want to give us a review? And so you can kind of use it in a lot of different ways. But I think that ultimately knowing what your customer wants and having that somewhere clearly stated is super helpful.
Yeah, and I think it's so true. And it's as well making sure that you have this data captured somewhere. And I guess that leads nicely to our next kind of topic that I wanted to ask you and pick your brains on about data. So something that we can see across L&D and HR and work in general really is very much of a desire to take a data-driven approach to CS. So customer success is definitely not different from that. How do you think we can apply metrics and analyze it to our strategies? So, for example, which metrics are you paying attention to currently, and how do you use them to influence whether it's success planning, etc.? So maybe Marika, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, sure. I think we're seeing this shift towards a more data-driven future in so many different parts of customer success. And I think that often it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you are somebody who visits LinkedIn often and you work in a small startup, to see how much people talk about data. And usually they're going to tell you that you're doing everything wrong and that you should stop whatever you're doing. I think the key thing here, especially if you're working in a smaller company or especially if you're building your team, is start small. Do one thing, but do it right, and really do it well. And pick your battles is the other one. If you're trying to get all of the data that's available in your data lakes or whatever, and then draw conclusions from it and spend all this time, probably doesn't make sense, because if your team is still growing, you're going to change what you're doing in 6 months time or so. So the one thing that we actually implemented for the first time last year at Primitive, and it seems very basic, but we started sending out NPS surveys for the first time. And there's a big debate in the industry whether that's the right thing to do, but it really worked for us, because I think that our ops team, our CS ops team, did it really, really well. We are very careful about who we send the NPS survey to, so it doesn't go out blanket to everyone. It only goes out to contacts that we know are completely irrelevant. Once we collect the NPS survey, it is available to the whole company. Everyone has access to it. Our customer success leadership solicits very clear commitment from the rest of the company that they will act on the feedback that has been given. And then for every single one of those NPS responses, we follow personally. So we either thank them, or we say how we're going to fix what they're doing, we acknowledge the feedback, or we book follow-up conversations. And every time before we send them the next NPS, we actually talk to them about how we've made changes based on the data that they've shared with us the last time. That's been a big game changer, and it has given a level of visibility to the company that we've never had. It was one step, but it was executed really, really well by our CS ops team. So I'd say if you're starting with data, or if you're building your team, pick one or two things, but do them well, and don't get overwhelmed by all the possibilities out there.
Yeah, it's so true what you're saying as well, that sometimes as a small team, you want to get involved in the CS network, and you might be seeing how big companies are playing the game of CS, and it can be a bit overwhelming. I remember a few years ago joining, and everybody was talking about health score, and I was like, oh no, we don't have that just yet. So it can definitely be a bit overwhelming, but as long as you choose the right metric that, you know, show engagement within your business and are particular to what your customers are performing on your product, I think is definitely more relevant than trying to fit everything at once. What about you, Elise? How do you use the metrics, and which ones are you tackling?
I think I have to completely agree with Marika. I think one of the mistakes that I made early on was doing exactly what you said, is like, these are all the metrics we need to see: 5% increases in this, and 10% increases in this, and adoption of this tool and adoption of that tool, and health scores this and that. And what ended up happening was every couple of months we would adjust how health scores were weighed and calculated and all of that. So then the previous numbers were absolute nonsense, and so you couldn't compare one health score to the next, like one from the following month, because they were weighted and calculated differently. And so it was just like hours of time spent, and also worry lines created in my forehead thinking about how to use this, when really it's exactly what Marika just mentioned. It's thinking about individual concepts and finding ways to make that data actually actionable. So I think NPS is a great example. I think a lot of people use it poorly, where they just like use it as a vanity metric. They receive a bunch of scores and then just leave it there. And the way that Marika is using it is, I think, excellent. I also think that looking at, if you want to look at adoption metrics, right, I think those are really valuable because they actually show if your customers are getting value or not. So maybe pick out one or two specific tools that you want to track adoption over time. If you focus on a customer and you have an onboarding call with them where they specifically mention wanting to use certain tools, then track that increase over time and say, like, before our call, they weren't using it. After our call, how long did it take them to start using it? And start trying to reduce that time to value. And so using metrics like those are a little bit more, they might be a little bit more time consuming to create and follow up on. However, they are actually, they're actionable. They allow you to say, like, I had a call with this customer to teach them exactly how to use this tool, and it's been 3 months and they're still not using it. What did I do wrong in that call? How could I have helped them set this up and actually get it live right away? And then it helps you adjust your processes in a more effective way.
And how, just a little bit to deep dive into the metrics world, how do you use this data to actually influence the success? So for example, let's say you have a customer that is not hitting any of the metrics that you have set for them. How do you then make sure that you push that and you educate, or what are the strategies from that perspective?
So we have automated processes to notify the CSM, but then every single touch point to a customer is manually created in my accounts. So I'll get a notification that a customer is not using X tool. And so then I can go into their account and see, oh, well, that makes sense because that wouldn't be a valuable tool for them. However, this is a more valuable tool. Or I can say, like, oh, this is actually something that's important. So we create Loom videos where we go in and say, like, hey, I noticed that you weren't using this. I'd love to show you really quickly how. Here's a video if you want. Let's set up a time to go over it together. And I think that those kinds of intentional, personalized outreach programs are way more effective than just that spam email that gets a customer. It's like, hey, you're not using tools, come check it out. Like, that's not valuable. But if I show them, oh, this is your product, this is this tool, this is how you should use it, let's book a time to talk about it. I think that can be a much more effective way to do to just like work on customer outreach overall.
And it's more proactive. It's also more personalized. So there is definitely a value there, because most of the time, otherwise, CS team might look at the metrics just prior to the QBR or the EBR, just to make sure that they go through the checklist and then they can demonstrate. Whereas with that approach, it's definitely a bit more proactive. Marika, any tips on how you use data from your side and how you really make a difference by using it with your success planning?
So we are, from that perspective, in a little bit of an interesting position at Permitive, because our tool is such that it can be used to create. To give you a little bit of context, our tool is used to create audiences that our customers can target across the web. And once those audiences have been created, they have to be sent to an ad server or somewhere else, and where they can actually be sold, and the customer can make revenue out of them. So actually, we are in a position where the ultimate result, we've learned that we can track lots of adoption metrics, but in our specific case, that adoption doesn't always directly equate to revenue for the customer. So really, the way our customers measure success from our tool is how much revenue it has ultimately helped them bring to the table to their own businesses. And we've kind of focused on that, on the last kind of the outcome-based metric, rather than the adoption, which can be different for different tools, right? So we actually work with our customers really, really closely, and we ask them to come to the table with metrics and with data. Which can sometimes be hard, because similarly to Elise, we have to be in a very high touch environment with our customers all the time, where this conversation is maintained, but also the customer success manager has a relationship that's good enough and strong enough so that the customer can share those metrics with us. But for us, it's about maintaining an open conversation and thinking together with the customer what's the best way forward for them and what's the next step. So that could be them coming to the table and bringing their own data from their businesses, but it could also be us sharing what data we have on them. We could say, hey, we've been tracking how likely you are to recommend us to your peers over the past 4 quarters. Here's how this has developed. Your scores have grown, your scores have dropped. Do you think this is a good representation of how your overall sentiment about our partnership, and how do you think it can improve? Like, have that conversation. Nothing stops you from sharing your knowledge about a customer with them and getting their understanding, or checking in with them to say, am I understanding our partnership correct? Would you say there's anything I'm missing? How do we move forward from here?
Yeah, and that's super important as well. And that will be my last comment as well. But just making sure that the CS team always asks questions to understand the customer better, because sometimes, as you say, we might have assumption, whether it comes from the sales team or, we might forget, we might have had an handover within the CS team. So it's so important to also train CSMs to really ask questions so that they understand the customers, the people they are working with, to then add the value as much as possible. This is definitely something that from our side, in our team, we've been working on a lot in the past kind of couple of quarters. Anything else you would like to add? Any tips about the CS world? I mean, I think we already had quite a lot of great insights into that. So I'll really thank you both, Elise and Marika, for joining today. There is some gold knowledge here. So thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. I'm just going to quickly check on the chat if there are any questions. I don't think there are, but just so that you know, we will be posting this webinar on LinkedIn and on social media, so keep an eye out. And for now, I think we will be able to stop recording. Thank you again for joining us today, and we'll be talking soon, I'm sure.
Thanks so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.